Good morning. I call the second general session of the 48th Annual Conference of the Enlisted Association of the National Guard of the United States to order. How about last night? Let's give a big round of applause for Iowa. If you didn't get enough food and that corn, then I don't know what to tell you. That was great, and they had plenty of it, so good time was had by all, I think. Before we get started with the morning, I'd just like to recognize we've got Command Chief, Master Sergeant Ron Anderson, the Command Chief of the Air National Guard. Would you stand up and be recognized? All right, Chief. There he is in the back. Thank you for being with us. Joined us and got in last night, so good to see him here. All right, at this time, are there any host state announcements?
Yes, we do. First off, we found a hearing aid somewhere. It's up in the Operations Center if you lost yours. Let me say that again. We found a hearing aid. It's in the ops cell if you need it. If you could please bring us your banquet numbers as soon as you can, take them up to the ops cell and they'll collect them up there. Other than that, we did have a good time last night. I appreciate all the attendance. Thank you.
Madam President, we have a distinguished guest in the chambers. Dr. Paul Lawrence, Undersecretary for Benefits of Veterans Affairs.
Sergeant at Arms, please have our distinguished guest escorted to the head table. All right. Sir, podium's all yours. We'll go ahead and get started.
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and talk to you today. I know you invited the Secretary, and he sends his regrets. He was actually asked by the President to go to the Far East to see our veterans in places like Guam and Micronesia. My geography isn't good there. They serve at a very high rate, and so he was there. In addition, the President asked him to go to send signals to our friends and our enemies that America remains the premier superpower in the world, all the world. So that's where he is, and again, you got me. Next slide. So what I want to do first before I begin is make sure I thank your leadership. They've been incredibly welcoming to, including try to get me as much Iowa corn last night as I could. And also on here, not on here, is Daniel Elkins, who we work with in Washington regularly. So again, we appreciate all the partnership with you all. Next slide. I thought I'd take a little minute to let you know who I am, because there's a couple of things that bother me when I sort of go places. One is like, well, who's this guy? And is he a veteran? Because, you know, I used to wear my airborne wings on this, but when I travel on commercial airlines, it kind of scares them. So I just use the American flag. So it bothered that. I'm actually, if you're keeping score, the second highest ranking person who's been confirmed by the Senate in the department. So I don't want you to think the Secretary sent somebody not important, because he values the partnership. But I also want you to know that I come from a military family. My father was in the Army, a career Army officer, served in Korea and Vietnam, and he's buried in Arlington Cemetery. My mother was a large family. 5 of her brothers served in World War II. 1 was killed in Korea, and my middle name is named after him. So I come from a military family. I served through ROTC, so did my brother. I got out and became a consultant in the civilian world, and a lot of my experience there is based on my financial experiences in roles that are very similar to some of the things that go on in the Veterans Benefits Administration. But what I really want to tell you about is sort of that last point of there is like, why did I take this job? Because I think what happens, and this happened to me the other day on an airplane, believe it or not, this never happened before I became this job, but they try to upgrade you to first class. And I can't do that. If you want to be in the Washington Post and very quickly become an ex-political appointee, you take the first-class upgrade. It's actually quite hard to turn it in. So I found that out. And so when I say I'm a political appointee, they immediately say, are you a friend of the president? And actually, that is not true. The undersecretaries at VA are actually selected through an interview process known as a commission, where you go through and people interview you and you do kind of the classic interview sort of thing. And so I remember in the fall of 2017, when folks said, this job is opening up, you should apply. It was one of my friends who was at the department. I figured, what the heck, he's my friend, I send in a resume, 1,000 people send in resumes, I'll honor that, and that'll be the end of that, because I had a great job in the private sector. Well, about 2 months later, they called me up and said, you're welcome to come interview for this job. We've selected you to be part of the people you interview. And so you sort of have this moment where you say, well, but I have this great job, maybe I shouldn't have sent my resume in. And then I recall an experience I had had about a year before. My son is an optometrist, glasses, and he was in optometry school, and afterwards he was planning to go his residency, where you spend an additional year getting training before you go off and practice. And he asked me, he came one day to me, he said, Dad, I tell you what, the residency options look like this. I can stay in a private practice, and that's really interesting. I'll get more skills. They pay a little bit more. I could go to a tribal thing, work with the underprivileged, and there's this thing called VA, and he kind of poo-pooed it and wanted to talk about the neat private practices he had been to. So I said to him, I said, do you remember the story I told you about your father, the cemetery, you've been there, the uncles, the great-uncles, the country, whatever, how can you not take the VA? And he did, and he got selected to serve his residency at the Hampton Medical Center, VA-MC in Hampton, Virginia, and it proved out wonderfully. And so I sat there in the moment and realized I've already given the speech to my son about why you serve, and that's what motivated me to go and pursue this thing, and I was selected and confirmed, and here I am. So I wanted you to give a little history that I thought carefully about this position and what it would mean and what I would do here and what I would focus on my time, and that is serving veterans. I have no aspirations for another job. You know, I do not want to be the secretary. I want to do this job for veterans, and so that's what I'm here doing. Next slide. So I thought what I'd do is give you a quick update on some of the things going on from VA, bring you some news the Secretary would share with you, talk a little bit about VBA, the benefits, some issues that I know are coming up, and then offer you some insights into how to stay in touch with us. Next slide. The Secretary talks a lot about VA undergoing the greatest period of transformation since Omar Bradley ran it. And that has to do with a lot of things that I want to take you through, but one of them is our focus on serving veterans and really providing world-class service to our veterans. So let me explain in the next slide the things we're doing that are based on legislation initiatives that have been going on the last 2 years. Mike, next slide. Since 2017, there's been a series of laws and initiatives that are driving this transformation. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about them. Accountability and mission are laws, electronic health records is initiative, and the GI Bill modernization, appeals modernization are things that go on in VBA. So I'd like to tell you for a minute how this is transforming the VA. Next slide. The Accountability Act was passed in 2017 to enable the VA to deal with habitually bad performers. So one of the ways we're going to bring better service to our veterans is remove people who don't want to serve veterans. Now, this might seem like a profoundly obvious insight, but the VA is the only place in the federal government we are able to do that without going through arduous rounds of appeals and like. So when you hear the president speak and he comes and he gets into the part of his speech where he riffs and said, and I passed this law that said you could be fired at the VA, this is what he's talking about, and I can't tell you how powerfully important it is. And even the most protective of the unions will say to us, we know you need to get rid of these people, and so this is very important. And again, I will tell you my personal journey, not having this law would have made me not turn in my resume and want to be interested in this job, because you can't make changes if you can't get rid of habitually bad performers. That was 2017. The Mission Act, and I know folks from here were there at the signing in the Rose Garden last year, is a very, very powerful law that enables veterans to have more choice as to how they receive their health care. And quite simply, it deals with the following. Gee, how comes I have to travel 4 hours to get care at a VA medical center and go through the hospital or the providers in my town 10 minutes away? That's what this law is designed to do, enable more choice for veterans, that you can choose what's closer and convenient to you. All right? It also provides additional ways for us to recruit providers. There's a real aggressive search for medical professionals, and VA needs to be armed to do that, and enables a whole bunch of things that are good, not the least of which is urgent care and the ability not to have to travel to a hospital, but to go to those minute clinics and enable that to be possible. It is very, very good stuff. It went into effect on June 6th, as we promised, 1 year to the date. So that was a very good thing, because I think people doubt VA can actually do stuff like that. But the most important thing is what's written at the bottom, because we got a lot of this when we were going through hearings this spring. Well, this is just a secret way in to privatize the VA, and I can't put big enough red lines through that to tell you that is not true. The illusion of we're meeting to plan the privatization of the VA is not true. The Secretary of all people will talk about the need for veterans to go to places like the VA where they understand veterans and that special thing. So his personal journey is one that will not prevent that from happening. So I just want to let you know about that. Next slide. The other sort of thing is electronic health record, which again, if you access private health care, is not that big a deal, but it really is a big deal in the VA. And right now, what we've decided to do about a year ago is to adopt the same health record that they have in DOD, so there'll be a seamless exchange between your service and then VA providing benefits. The Secretary tells a powerful story of his father, who was severely injured in the Vietnam War and the invasion of Cambodia. For the rest of his life, would cart around an 800-page health record, and that's what this is designed to prevent. From a VBA, from a benefits perspective, this is very powerful stuff, because we'll be able to find your health record quickly when you access benefits. In a perfect world, we'll be able to look at it before you show up and say, it is most likely, given your service and your journey, this is what you'll need or be entitled to based on our history. We could probably use your help. This is a big deal and will take a long time for us to do. I think we said it's a 10-year journey to fully implement. It's large and complex. Any help you can when people say that seems like it's a long time, you could remind them it's complex, and that would be really helpful. Next slide. Over at VBA, we handle a couple other things, so I want to give you a minute on VBA. We process the benefits. We're a smaller group compared to the hospitals. We're about 24,000 people. Most of them are veterans. We have offices in 56 major cities around the country and one in Manila. To include one here in Des Moines, where I'll go this afternoon, or actually later this morning when I get done, and other sites. We administer the benefits. You can see last quarter, we administered $28 billion in benefits. Yearly, we administer over $100 billion in benefits to veterans. Next one. There are 8 business lines, 8 benefits we deal with, and I just want to run you through this real quickly, not to drain it, but to make you aware of the wide range of benefits America provides to its veterans. In the upper right, you know about compensation. If you've been injured or disabled, you apply for compensation grants, and we do that. Appeals, we provide an active mechanism for you. If you disagree with our decision upon anything, you can go and appeal. Home loan guarantee, right? No money down, purchase of a home. Upper left-hand corner, education, the classic GI Bill, and the billions of dollars of benefits. Insurance, I know that I regularly talk to the young people in the audience that buying insurance early is a good thing. We actually run the 14th largest insurance company in the United States, and it is highly touted. I'd urge you to look into that. Pension and fiduciary refers to what's available for you if you find yourself in an unfortunate situation where you have limited access to resources. Pension and fiduciary, in the unlikely event you are unable to manage your benefits yourself, we will appoint somebody to manage those benefits for you. And the newest, and vocational rehabilitation employment is what it is. It helps people whose life has changed to get counseling, to find a better path. And the newest one, which I started last year, is Transition and Economic Development, focusing on making sure we do all we can for veterans and service members as they leave and transition back into civilian life and reintegrate. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those, but I want you to know the benefits portfolio is large and generous. A couple things. When I showed up a year ago, I promised, and I've stuck to this, that I would have priorities, and this is what I would focus on, just to let you know. The first one on the left is providing veterans the benefits they've earned in a manner that honors their service. The Secretary showed up 2 months ago and talked about the importance of customer service. Had he showed up before me, I would have called that customer service, but that's what it is. It's really trying to make sure the benefits administration works well. The middle one talks about being good fiscal stewards with maintaining, administering over $100 billion. There's tremendous pressure from both sides. The American taxpayer wants to make sure we do it well. The veterans want to make sure we do it accurately, and somehow we've got to always seek the middle ground so we're seen as fair, not yielding too much, tipping too much to either side. And the last one is collaboration, and that's in part why I'm so excited to be here. It bothers me tremendously when I see organizations, and this is not you, but the classic veteran service organizations who have on their website, their mission is to fight for veterans' benefits. And I always ask myself, who are you fighting with? We're on the same team. So I understand that we may never agree on everything, but the sense of being able to align on what's important for veterans strikes me as really, really important, and we have to deal with that directly. So my goal is to get rid of that word fight. We may have conflicts, but certainly there's so much more we can agree on. In terms of how we're doing, I just want to bring your attention to this, which is something we're pretty proud of at VBA. Between May and June, I issued a challenge to our claims processing team. It's about 8,000 people in the United States who process the claims that you classically know when you apply for service disability. I challenged them in that period of time to do more work in 8 weeks than they'd previously done in the best 9 weeks on that period of time before. We called it the Independence Day Challenge. And I said, if you do this, I have limited flexibility in this job, can't give you more money, but the one thing I can do is give you time off. So I will give you the Friday of the July 4th weekend so you can have a 4-day weekend, and that will be something special for you to think about over Independence Day as to how you're serving veterans and what they'll think about that day. And so they did. I asked them to process 255,000 claims. They did almost 270,000 claims. Quality didn't change, and the other work didn't change. So I want you to know I'm pushing these guys hard to make sure they're serving veterans. That went so well, other folks came up, and we're actually running now a Labor Day challenge for others to do more work in the same period than they've ever done before. So just to let you know, a pulse on how's it all going. So let's go back to some of the things that relate to the Secretary's focus on customer service. One of them was appeals. So another piece of legislation in 2017 was appeals modernization. If you filed appeal prior to appeals modernization, you waited from 3 to 7 years to get a decision. It was long and arduous and nobody liked it. So the new law was passed in 2017 to modernize the appeals process. It was implemented on February 19th of this year, and there you see us celebrating the successful implementation. Again, trying to change the narrative that when things go to VA, they don't never end up working on time. It did. It began in 2019. Some of the highlights on the next slide are, at VBA, there's now 3 lanes for veterans to apply for appeal. You can go to the Board of Veterans Appeals. That's lane 3 and not represented here because the board is a separate entity and they manage that work. But you can choose somewhat expedited lanes that are represented here. Lane 1 is called supplemental claim. You add some more information. Lane 2 is a higher level review, kind of like the NFL. I want another review of this. Okay, we promised those claims to be done in 125 days, and you can see, while it's still early, they're being done significantly early, 50 and 30 days. So it's never a good idea to declare success early, but early indications are this is going very well. So I just want to let you know that's a pulse check on appeals modernization because I know it comes up. Next slide. I want to talk about the Forever GI Bill because this also was signed in 2017. Talk about, people make fun of Congress. They had a heck of a week, middle of August 2017. They got the appeals modernization signed by President, got the Forever GI Bill signed by President. It is what it does. It allows the GI Bill benefits to last forever for your services after January 1st, 2013. It allows us to restore benefits if you've gone to a place that's gone out of business, no fault of your own. It enables special benefits for Purple Heart. But like I told the folks in the back of the room when I came to their session early this morning, two really exciting things are what's known as vet tech, apprenticeships in the high-tech industry, and STEM, an additional 9 months of benefits for those folks studying science, technology, engineering, and math to get advanced certifications. So this is really interesting and powerful stuff. And there you can see the number. It's all over our website, and we're able to help people access it. And again, one of the most popular benefits that we operate. I'm showing the next slide because I want you to know we operate this pretty well. Last fall, we stumbled on implementing one feature of the Forever GI Bill, and it made the national news, and I made the national news, and it was like a pretty difficult situation because the computer programs didn't work, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I wanted to call your attention to the third row there, timeliness of processing of applications. We promised they'll be done in 28 days, and again, it's not all us. We got to get some information from the schools, but we're doing it in 23 right now as we're heading into the fall semester. Next slide. But I do want to talk about what I call the GI Bill reset. The Forever GI Bill had 28 provisions that were supposed to be done by August of 2018. Had 30 provisions. We did 28 of them, but the two that everybody was excited were the military housing allowance, which had been changed to better reflect student flows. We, and again, partially I was there, so if you get credit for stuff you didn't do, you get blamed for stuff you didn't do. We really came up short on this, and it ended up being particularly bad. And so it was such a difficult situation, we just said, we're not going to be able to implement those two features, sections of the law, until December 1st, 2019. So it's called the reset while we go back and figure out what went wrong and do it. And so basically, we're in the process of building new software, which will go into effect on December 1st of 2019. So in the spring of 2020, those sections which reflect how you're paid for your housing allowance will be in effect. So come January 1st, there will be checks based on the new methodology. We know it will be different for people because it's based on sort of where you take the preponderance of your credits. I don't want to get into this too much, but it's not just the main campus if you've been in other campuses. So in the fall, you'll see extensive communication. So I'd ask you to share with your members or folks the need to pay attention to this communication as we explain how the allowance is going to change. For the most part, it either is equal to what they're getting now or more. In some, it actually becomes less, and that's just kind of how the new rules work. So we'll try to explain all this to everybody. After we've done that, we're going to do in the spring of 2020 what we call a true-up. If you've been owed money, had the law been actually administered in 2018, we will go all the way back, recompute what you were owed, and sometime after we've done the spring semester, we will send you the difference in money. That's the true-up. Again, we'll have lots of comms in this. And finally, and most importantly, I'd ask you to look at the last one. If, come to find out, we've been overpaying you during this period of time, we will not collect the overpayment. Okay? So there should be no confusion of this. We're going to do tremendous amounts of communication. But if you have anybody going, hey, this GI Bill thing is new and I'm a little unaware of this, tell them, how can that possibly be? We probably send out 5 million emails a week on this, okay? And that's not much of an exaggeration. So please, please, please help us get the word out. Look for more on that. But very, very serious focusing, honoring the commitment made, acknowledging how we did come up short on this one. And don't worry, we all feel pretty bad. It was incredibly public. I will tell you, I went to a hearing that made national news. You always sort of imagine, wouldn't it be cool to be on national TV? Well, I tell you, I was and it wasn't. It was really pretty embarrassing. And it was so embarrassing, so this is the test. Why do you think you're going to get this right? This was my Thanksgiving. Maybe you have this here, where you go around the room and everybody says what you're thankful for. My mom is 94. She's still with us. My mom comes around and says, I'll be thankful if my son isn't on the national news and he gets the GI Bill implemented correctly. When your mom is telling you that, you know you've got to do it, okay? So that's my personal story on this one, okay? So next slide. Home loan guarantee, want to call your attention to that. The new law takes the cap off this, and this is good for high-cost areas. Very, very powerful benefit. Please, please, please encourage everybody who's thinking about renting to look carefully at home ownership. Can't tell you how valuable this is. What you see there is a now retired Army sergeant who was the 24th millionth home loan recipient. So this goes back, it is one of the original features of the GI Bill. This is genius stuff that creates wealth in our country, and I'd encourage everybody to be aware of that. But of course, related to that is the next slide, which is some of the stumbling we've done. We identified that there are a series of people who are owed funding fee refunds. Let me explain real quick. If you bought a home while your application for service disability was in process, when we finally granted you service disability, included in the incredibly small fine print is, boy, now, if you bought a home, you can get your funding fee refunded. Not a lot of veterans did this, a lot of structural and process problems. So we're in the process of identifying who we owe a refund to, and we'll have those refunds done by September 30th. If you think you're in this group, there's a phone number, there's websites. I'm going to leave the slides with your folks so they can mail it around and find the links. But that's something we're working on very, very aggressively to get that money back. And quite frankly, we're actually ahead of schedule, so I don't want to overpromise. But we know that's a pretty important thing, and we're fixing it. And quite frankly, the really good news is we were finally able to get somebody to understand the problem with the process, right? All the paperwork, all the details, all the stuff. Well, we actually know at VBA who has a home loan and who's now been granted benefits in such a way they don't need the, we're going to now match and just send the checks and stop all the extra paperwork. So we're trying, but you know, I hope there's no lawyers in here. Boy, they can find reasons not to do anything. So it does take a while. So I just want to bring you up to date on that. And the last thing is, I understand this is the Army and Air Force National Guard, but the Blue Water Navy is a big piece of legislation. And I think there were some service members in the Army and Air Force on these ships, right? And this is important because this deals with Agent Orange and the presumption of who was covered and who was not. As you recall, the Agent Orange legislation focused on people who were on the ground in Vietnam and then in the brown waters on the rivers of Vietnam, but it never dealt with the folks offshore, 12 miles offshore. Legislation was just passed to include them, and that'll go into effect on January 1st of 2020. We're in the process of getting ready. We're getting ship logs, and we're scanning, and we're developing protocols and processes to do that. So on January 1st, we can begin to grant to the Blue Water Navy folks. Please, 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 if you have friends and they hear about it and they think January's forever away, ask them, say, please go and apply for benefits if you think you are covered. We can do the development work so that we can grant on January 1st. So that's just a little bit on that. There's a lot more information about that. That'll play out, again, more communication, more efforts to let everyone know that the benefits are there and available. And so we get a lot of questions, just so you know, maybe not relevant. Can I submit my own evidence? Yes, of course, you can do this for any claim. Often it's, you know, records are old, but you have a picture or a buddy statement that shows you were on the ship in the 12 miles. That's the hardest thing to do, is find the ships and see where they exactly were. Though the Department of Defense, I will give them credit, and the Navy have been awesome working with us. Even the Archivist of the United States is providing the secret records that nobody gets to touch. We've actually been there, like in the National Treasure, the movie, right? Touching the stuff down there, and they're incredibly helpful. And come to find out, he's actually a Blue Water Navy veteran, so he's personally involved, and it means a lot to him. And yes, while January 1st is forever away, seems like, will the Blue Water Navy claims be expedited? And the answer is no. However, there are certain reasons we do expedite your claim, and they're listed there: old age, imminent homelessness, financial hardship, and a series of other things. So when you qualify for that, we expedite your claim. So it's our effort to let everyone know we understand the situation they're in and what we're doing to provide the benefits as fast as we can. So that's it. All right, so as I come to the end, I want to do two things with you here. The first is make an offer, which I've already discussed to your leadership, and that is appreciating the special nature of this group. I know, because I did this in my preparation to come here, that you all have special unique challenges that are related to accessing benefits. I already got this when I talked to the folks this morning about what about this special case when I was here and I got some and I'm trying to add it to this and that. I understand. I understand how important the Guard is in our country. So instead of me going glibly, oh, I have all the answers, I just thought it through and solved that problem, what I've offered to do is have Mike in the back, who's flipping the slides, my VSO liaison, form a task force, some of our folks, and we've talked to your leadership about this, some of your folks, to really understand the particulars and try to figure out how we get after those issues. Some could be processes we don't understand. That's entirely possible. Some could be processes and rules we invented, and I can fix those. Others could be legislative, but most of them probably because we just don't understand the details. So that's my offer, and I promise to come back if I'm invited a year from now, or if not sooner, to really tell you like what we did and how we thought we were dealing, what your concerns were. So I want to make sure you leave with that, because I understand the special journey you all travel and the uniqueness you feel. And if we're going to make benefits accessible to you, we should actually make benefits accessible to you. So that's my intention on that. Okay? And the other thing is a request. You can go to the next slide. In the cabinet, VA feels like Rodney Dangerfield, and this is like a reference to something that the older people tend to get, right? The people who get no respect. The younger people in the back are looking up at the sky. They have no idea what I'm talking about. But you can Google him and see his tagline was, I get no respect. And believe it or not, he was actually clean in his comedy, so it's also unique. And you sort of go, well, that's life. Get thick skin, and we have that, and we do. But I just want to call your attention to what I'll call a constant cadence of bad news really leads to distrust. Well, why should I go to the VA? I hear such negative things about it. Oh yeah, nothing works and like, so I really need your help, what I'll call changing the narrative. Go to the next slide. I mean, here's some things to think about. The hospitals run the largest integrated healthcare system in the country. 9 million healthcare enrollees. This is a huge system, okay? The doctors in residence, remember I mentioned my son goes in residency? 123,000 doctors are at the VA learning how to become doctors. That's where they go to learn and train. That's where they go. And now I'll make this very, very personal. That's about a third of the doctors in the United States. If you ask your doctor, who's not related to the military or the service, where did you get your training? They're very likely to say VA. And I will tell you the truth now. Back to my son. So he finally comes ready to get a job, and he wants to leave the VA system and come back and live in the Northern Virginia area. When they found out he had been trained at the VA, he got 10% more in his pay than his peers did. That's how valuable this training is, and I'm not even thinking about what the cardiosurgeons and all that advanced medicine. So I can tell you, this is why I believe the VA will never be privatized. There is no place where this can happen. So this is why I don't lose a whole lot of sleep, because the people who are saying that simply don't understand how it works. At the VBA, as I've already told you, we administer $100 billion in benefits. Our budget's about $4 billion. You can do the math. That's penny on the dollars. People from around the world come to study how VBA operates, to include some private sector companies that wonder per capita how you can do that so cheaply. And if you really want to be excited, is all this kind of a difficult thing to think about, I know, the National Cemetery Administration has the unbelievably highest customer service as measured by the American Customer Satisfaction Index. They can't even believe how high that number is. So it's really a good news story. Next slide. But it's not just us telling you this. I just want to call your attention to a couple things. This year, the Partnership for Public Service, it's a good government organization, bipartisan in Washington, D.C., selected a VA as one of the best places to work, which is historically not anywhere near the close conversation. And this has happened under Mr. Wilkie's leadership. VA healthcare on a Dartmouth report is good or better than anywhere in the country. The Journal of American Medicine, the wait times are shorter. And in a big customer service award ceremony, 11 VA leaders were recognized. So I just ask you to sort of think about perspective in the time of the world we're in, right? As a candidate and president, Donald Trump has made veterans the centerpiece of what he's talked about from the very beginning. The Congress, working with us, has provided the largest budget in the history of our country to the VA, and the laws that I just described to enable us to manage. Perhaps it's insider bias because I'm on the senior leadership team, but the senior leadership team is almost all veterans, and I just can't imagine there's been a time where there's been more management talent trying to drive the veteran agenda. And then, of course, if you think about what's happened with unemployment in the United States, right, and I don't think that's by luck, unemployment goes down, veteran unemployment goes down. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. I rode the elevator up. I was just telling Frank this a minute ago. I rode the elevator after I came in and went to the party and ate my share of corn. And I rode the elevator up and got on in the hotel. And there were two, I always say younger women, I'm guessing somewhere between 30 and 40, but I can't really say those things publicly, but they weren't so young. And then other members came in. Other folks came in, people probably are here now, and pretty clearly I could figure out they were going to EANGUS. The women were awesomely polite and said, "Why are you here?" And the guy said, "Oh, we're with EANGUS." And they started talking very positively about what's going on. And I'm thinking, you know, maybe I should tell them we have job openings at VA. But I said, it's like 9:30. Come on, everyone's like, whatever. Without missing a beat, the women turned and said, you know, we're with the Department of Agriculture. We hire veterans all the time. Would you go to our website? And I thought, isn't that awesome? 9:30 on a Sunday night with no other reason other than they care. They're trying to help veterans. That's the time of the world we're in right now, and it's pretty darn exciting. So I'd ask you the next time you see somebody who interacts with you and you say, blah, 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 VA, and they roll their eyes or give you that kind of smirky thing, so just turn to them, and this is what I'd ask you to do. Say, listen, what you're saying is not accurate. America honors its veterans, and by any measure, VA provides world-class benefits and services. We have to stop this. If you have such a story, because inevitably I hear it, please share it with us. If you're a social media person, please share it out there. The Secretary likes to say we have almost 400,000 people in the VA, broadly. It's probably 375. There's 200 knuckleheads that get all the attention. So I really need your help changing that narrative. So a couple last little things here before quickly, and I'll try to do some questions. Connect with us now. I know there's a lot of folks on social media. We're really trying to up our social media presence. I mean, you know, if you're playing with your phone right now, click on Twitter, go to the search bar, write Veterans Benefits. We'll pop up. Click on us. How are you going to find out what's going on? We really are trying to do that. Or any of the other ones, I'm not a Twitterophile. I just told you that because it came up first in my brain. But we're really trying to get that out there, and you can share your experiences and the like. Next slide. If none of those make any sense to you, you can call us. You can find us these ways. We'll do the same thing, okay? But again, there's all that information for you to have. So, and last slide, we are hiring, VBA in particular, cool jobs. Sounds like we're processing claims, but we do finance, we do science, we do math, we do computers. These are cool jobs that pay well, okay? So again, thank you very much for letting me be here. I yield to the chair to tell me how much time I'll have for Q&A if that's possible, but I really appreciate the opportunity to come and share what we'll call the good news stories at VA. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence. And so I think we've got time for maybe 2 questions. If anybody's got anything, you can come up to the mic. I would ask if try and limit not casework because about your individual claim or what's going on, but if anybody's got anything for Dr. Lawrence. Do we have one? Okay.
Yes, Tony Nathy from Minnesota. 2 things. Recent legislation passed is exempting the IRS from going back only 3 years for adjusting income taxes. If a VA claim takes more than 48 or 60 months and you have to refile, let's say, 5 years of back taxes, the IRS will only process 3 years back. But just in the last week, the Congress made an exception on another law that was passed that you can go back farther than 3 years. So all those veterans who out there waited 60 or 72 months to get their claims approved, they lost, in some cases, the 4th, 5th, and 6th year of taxes refiling. Has there been anything to address that?
Yeah, I don't want claims to go 48 to 60 months, but I understand your broader point. I was unaware of that. I'm going to take that and run that down because that's not our intention to unintentionally harm veterans in the way you're describing. So I would hope we could figure out how to do exactly that, because that would just be unfortunate, quite frankly.
Prior to this, the IRS wasn't making any
Yeah.
exemptions for that 3-year rule.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand. No,
The
thank you for
second
bringing that up.
question is for Agent Orange. Has there been any additional law or investigation on the dependents issue for dependent physical claims for Agent Orange for Vietnam veterans?
Yeah, the law is pretty clear on this. So I know that the new law entitles benefits for dependents under certain circumstances, but that's pretty much it. We have a series of ongoing studies, but as you know, they always take a long period of times to get it right. So not more than what you're seeing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
To answer part of his question, VA compensation is not taxable anyway.
That's right.
I've been a county service officer for nearly 14 years, and you guys are making improvements. When I first started, it was taking about 240 days. You've got it down to half that. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for sharing that. Yeah. Probably good to end on a compliment, so I'll call it a day. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Lawrence, for being here with us. Some great information about benefits. I think everybody can relate to some of this, and if you can't now, as you file for claims later on, very, very valuable information. We appreciate everything you do for our National Guard members and veterans across the United States. So as a token of appreciation, I'd like to give you our conference coin, and thank you so much for being here. All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Sergeant at Arms, please have our distinguished guests escorted from the head table. All right. Okay, yes. Yeah, okay.
Madam President,
Sergeant at Arms,
we have a distinguished guest within chambers. Association of the United States Army President and CEO, General Retired Carter Ham.
please have our distinguished guests escorted to the head table. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks very much, and good morning. Partying last night, I think. That's right. I noticed that there's, Madam President, there's a bigger crowd here today than yesterday. I think that's perhaps because people heard yesterday that Mississippi is now selling shoes by the pair. Maybe that brought a larger audience. It is great to be with you. Madam President, members of the Executive Council, Executive Director Frank Yoakum, Sergeant Major Troxell, I think, is entering the room, Chief Master Sergeant Anderson, Command Sergeant Major Sampa, and so many more. I learned in my last job at United States Africa Command, the Africans have a wonderful tradition. When there's a large audience like this, each person in the audience worthy of individual recognition, the Africans say simply, all protocol observed. And so everybody is okay. So all protocol observed, and it is wonderful to be with you. With one exception, and I would single out this group in the back, the young soldiers and airmen who are here for professional development. It's great that you're here. You are the future, not just of this association, and not just of the Air Force, and not just of the Army. You are the future of the nation. Thank you for serving. Thank you for choosing to be here today. As you heard, I'm an old general, and I'm pretty accustomed to talking with crowds. I'm pretty comfortable actually speaking before Congress with senior military and civilian officials to presidents and prime ministers. Madam President, this is a little intimidating. So many sergeants major and chief master sergeants, and that's because I started my service as a young enlisted soldier, and I rose to the exalted position of being our battalion command sergeant major's driver. And so sergeants major and chief master sergeants are a little bit intimidating to me, so if you'll forgive me a little nervousness, I'll get through it. But I think it's a fair question to ask, why is some old Army general who never spent one day in the National Guard addressing the Enlisted Association of the National Guard of the United States? It's a fair question, I think. And I would offer you 3 reasons why I'm glad to be here. The first is 2 people many of you know. Sergeant Major of the Army retired Ken Preston, who's sitting in the back, and Sergeant Major retired Frank Yoakum, your very own executive director. The 2 of them said, "Hey, General, you ought to go there." And so one of the things I learned being an old general is you become an old general and wiser when you do what the sergeant major tells you to do. So that's kind of reason number 1 I'm here. The sergeants major say you ought to go. The second reason I'm here is math. I'm not a math major, but I know enough about math that math makes sense. I'm privileged, as you heard, to lead the Association of the United States Army. The United States Army has just over 1 million soldiers in the total Army. 84% of the Army is enlisted. That's a pretty big number. And about 35% of the Army resides in the Army National Guard. So as the Association of the United States Army, we endeavor to support the total Army. I thought maybe, just maybe, it might make sense for our association to pay attention to the enlisted force of the United States Army, a large component of which resides in the Army National Guard. So that's kind of reason number 2. Reason number 3 is, to me at least, the most important reason. And that is, though I never served in the National Guard, I believe in the National Guard. I believe that the citizen soldier, I believe that the citizen airman represents the very best of our country. At war and in peace, at home and abroad, the very best of America is represented in the National Guard. A few years ago, I was privileged to serve as the chair, to lead the congressionally appointed National Commission on the Future of the Army. The Army, the big Army and the Army National Guard were bickering about a number of issues. Aviation, some of you will remember, were at the top of that list. And so the Congress intervened and said, we're going to appoint a commission. And I was privileged to serve as the chairman of that commission. We rendered a report. It's about 260 some odd pages, 63 recommendations. It is, by the way, you can still find it on the website. It is, by the way, a perfect, and I mean perfect, cure for insomnia. So if you're having a trouble, tuck that little report under your pillow, you'll be good to go. But there's one phrase in that report that I believe is more important than all others. And it says simply, the nation has one army for sound reasons, historical, cultural, legal, operational, and strategic. The Army has 3 distinct, interdependent, and essential components: the regular Army, the Army National Guard, and the Army Reserve. And it's my view that it's only when the 3 components of the Army are properly sized, manned, trained, equipped, modernized, that the nation's Army, the total Army, can deliver the capabilities that the nation requires. That's what we at the Association of the United States Army endeavor to do. That's what we advocate for each and every day with the Army, with the National Guard Bureau, with the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and with Congress. And it's why we formalized our partnership with your association, with the Enlisted Association of the National Guard of the United States. A few years ago, Sergeant Major Yoakum and we began a conversation about how our two associations might better support each other to achieve our mutual objectives. That led eventually, with the approval of the Executive Council, a formalized partnership between our two associations, one that I know has been of benefit to the Association of the United States Army, and I hope, Madam President and Mr. Executive Director, I hope has been beneficial to your association as well. We've continued to grow and strengthen that partnership over the past couple of years. We work together. And working together, we see expanded opportunities for education and professional development programs. We see opportunities for expanded member benefits, including scholarships and discount programs. We seek to use AUSA's long-standing relationship with the senior Army leaders to advance the voice of EANGUS with the Army and our combined voices, whether it's speaking to the Army, the National Guard Bureau, to the Congress. Our combined voices carry more weight, and we've seen some positive outcomes already. In our work with Congress, you've heard some comments already from the EANGUS leadership and from others, but we share many common goals, the most important of which we believe has been the two-year budget agreement approved by the Congress. That settles a lot of uncertainty moving forward for this year and next fiscal year. We believe that important. Still work to be done. They've got to pass an actual budget and to avoid a continuing resolution. EANGUS and AUSA are aligned in that regard. We support at AUSA, we support end strength growth, reasonable end strength growth for all three components of the Army, but particularly for the Army National Guard, that end strength growth must also be met with sufficient resources to train, modernize, and equip growth in end strength. We support, and I am concerned about the integrated pay and personnel system Army. You heard about that yesterday, where Pennsylvania has fielded that system with great effect, but frankly, we're having some challenges in the Congress in sustaining the level of funding necessary to extend IPSA across the Army National Guard and the Army Reserve. We've got some work to do during conference. AUSA has partnered with EANGUS. We've voiced our concern about some of the changes that are proposed in Army medicine and defense-wide medicine to make sure that the core mission of providing medical support in combat zones is retained. We support the expansion of TRICARE Reserve Select. As the President said yesterday, we are supportive, along with you, and the accounting, the proper accounting and credit for those who have served under Section 12304 Bravo to make sure that they get adequate credit for that service. Those issues and many more, EANGUS and AUSA are closely aligned and moving forward. In all that AUSA does, though, we remember that as we were reminded in song yesterday, that it has always been about the soldier. Our mission at AUSA is to be a voice for the Army and to provide support for the soldier. Our partnership with EANGUS strengthens our ability to do just that. And I'm deeply personally and professionally appreciative of the opportunity to work together with EANGUS. We look forward to seeing many of you at our AUSA annual meeting in Washington, D.C., 14 through 16 October. This is a big year for the Army, a new secretary, a new chief of staff, a new sergeant major of the Army, and we look forward to, again, strengthening our relationship with you during that annual meeting. And we very much look forward to seeing many of you next year in Little Rock for the Big Dam Conference, all right, which I think will be great fun. But thank you, each and every one of you, for what you do every day in support of soldiers and airmen, in support of our Army, in support of our Air Force, and in support of our nation. You truly make a difference, and it is a great honor and privilege for the Association of the United States Army to be formally aligned with the Enlisted Association of the National Guard of the United States. Thank you for allowing us to be your partner. Madam President, thank you very much for allowing me to join you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, General Ham, for your comments, and we really do appreciate the partnership with AUSA, and so I'm giving you our conference coin in appreciation. Thank you so much
Thanks,
for being
Madam
here.
President. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Sergeant at Arms, please escort our distinguished guest from the floor. Okay, going to get ready to move into a break, but before we do that, I want to bring up two of our EANGUS Platinum partners who were not in the room yesterday when we recognized those. So first up, we'd like to give special recognition to a significant supporter of our scholarship program, and that is American Intercontinental University. Doug Harris, you in the room? There he is. Come on up, Doug, and just join us up here. They provide 6 full tuition scholarships to EANGUS for our members, spouses, and dependent children. They've been a faithful partner to our efforts to bring educational resources to our membership, and we certainly appreciate everything they do for us in our partnership with them. So give them a round of applause. I'd also like to bring up, second one is Military Benefit Association, represented by Mark Wilson. There's Mark. Mark has really been a true friend to EANGUS for many, many years, first with Grantham University and now with MBA. They have supported many of our junior enlisted events here at the conference, as well as I know he's out there in your states supporting you out there. So again, let's give both of these Platinum partners a big round of applause for everything they do for us. And don't forget to visit their booths when you get out there on the floor. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. One other thing, so as the General mentioned, we now have Command Sergeant Major Troxell in the room with you. Can you stand and be recognized? Thank you. Thank you. The other group that I'd like to recognize before we go into break, and that is Command Sergeant Major Sampa. I know he's back there somewhere, there he is. Lights in my eyes. All right. And if I could also have all of the Army National Guard, state and division CSMs that are in the room, please stand and be recognized. Thank you so much for being here. There we go. All right. It always means a lot to our soldiers and airmen to have their leadership here with them at the conference, and I've already challenged them as they see you to grab you and engage and network, because they don't always get a chance to do that back in their home state. So I think this is a good opportunity, and we really appreciate everything Sergeant Major Sampa and his team have done to bring his conference here to Camp Dodge and to Iowa. So thank you very much. All right, at this time, we're going to take a break. Please make sure while you're out there that you visit those exhibitors. We ask that you be back in your seats promptly at 10:45 when we'll hear Command Sergeant Major Troxell's remarks. I now call the second business session back to order.
Madam President,
Sergeant at Arms.
we have a distinguished guest, Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Joint Chief of Staff, Command Sergeant Major John Wayne Troxell.
Sergeant at Arms, please have our distinguished guest escorted to the head table.
Command Sergeant Major John Wayne Troxell is the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. As a senior non-commissioned officer in the U.S. Armed Forces, he serves as a principal military advisor to the Chairman and to the Secretary of Defense on all matters involving joint and combined total force integration, utilization, health of the force, and joint development for enlisted personnel. Command Sergeant Major Troxell enlisted in the U.S. Army in September of 1982 as an armored reconnaissance specialist and graduated from training at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Command Sergeant Major Troxell has served in the Army for over 30 years in numerous units throughout his career. Command Sergeant Major Troxell, 5 combat tours include making a combat parachute jump in service on Operation Just Cause in Panama, Operation Desert Shield Storm, 2 tours in Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan.
Thank you. Please welcome Command Sergeant Major Troxell.
Thank you so much. If you don't mind, all right. Well, good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me out there. All right, it is truly an honor for me to be here today, to be a part of the Enlisted Association of the National Guard of the United States. One, because the EANGUS is a great organization, but also because it's taken place in the great state of Iowa. And I'm a guy that grew up in Davenport, Iowa, you know, and cut my teeth down on River Drive down in Davenport prior to joining the military when I was 18, and I've been doing this ever since. So it's great to be back in God's country. And so I got to tell a quick story. Where's all the Iowa folks at in there? All right, okay. So I've been doing this thing for 37 years now, and I've always tried to be that senior enlisted leader that led through example, so more of what I say, but what I do as the example for the men and women in our armed forces. And so I was asked a few years back, Sergeant Major Kennebeck and I just had a conversation about this because he was witness to this, and a few years back, I was asked to come to an OCS commissioning ceremony right here in Camp Dodge. And the officer in charge was a guy named Phil Turner, who's now a lieutenant colonel, but in the 80s, he was a young sergeant that worked for me in the 82nd Airborne Division, and he's got plenty of Troxell scar tissue all over him. But he wanted me to do a PT session on these cadets that were about to get commissioned and be officers in the great Iowa National Guard, and some of them were going to go on and lead troops in the 2nd Brigade of the 34th in Afghanistan in combat operations. And he said, hey, I want you to come in and put a healthy dose of scunion on these folks. So I had this big plan that had tires, rocks, ropes, chains, and all kinds of stuff to get after functional fitness on them. And I spent 2 hours out on a PT field at Camp Dodge trying to put some smoke on these wrestlers, football players, farmers, and all of the like that come from the great state of Iowa. And after about 2 hours, they had to shovel me off of the PT field because these young men and women were extremely physically, mentally, and emotionally hard. Now, I love all the states and territories, but that's an instant right there of what you get when you have the Iowa Guard involved in something, all right? So anyways, it's great to be here today. And I'm not alone. 2 of my best teammates in the armed forces are here today. Sergeant Major John Sampa, where you at? Please stand up. John, great to see you leading our great Army Guard. John, thanks. And standing next to him, I don't know if they're talking or not, but the Air National Guard Senior Enlisted Leader, Chief Master Sergeant Ron Anderson. Ron, great to see you here today. And also from Washington, D.C. with me is our Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Assistant or the Undersecretary of Defense for Manpower Reserve Affairs, also doubling in personnel and readiness, Sergeant Major Tracy Baroglio. Did I get it right? Yeah. So again, it's great to be here today. What I want to talk to you a little bit about is I kind of want to start at the strategic level and what's going on in our world, and then kind of whittle it down to what this organization is about and kind of talk to you about the great things that our enlisted force, specifically what our National Guard troops are doing around the world, and then how we have to continue to invest in people to make sure that we meet the challenges of the operational environment today and in the future. So, and please humor me here, okay, if I'm talking something that you've known about for 30 years, please humor me here. But you know, our nation develops a national security strategy that is born out of the administration and is developed by the National Security Advisor to the President of the United States. And within that national security strategy, our Secretary of Defense takes out the portion that involves the Defense Department, and he develops the National Defense Strategy. And it kind of talks about what we think the primary threats to the United States of America, our allies, and our interests abroad might be. And for the latest National Defense Strategy, we kind of couched the threats in what we call a 2+3. The 2 meaning Russia and China. And what we thought is that because of the actions of Russia and China, we expect in the future that we're going to be in a period of long-term power competition, where not only will we have to have desired effects with these two countries short of conflict from a military perspective, but also with the other elements of national power. And the +3, 2 rogue nations that are regional actors trying to be global players, Iran and North Korea. And if you look at the Iranians right now and what they're doing in places like the Strait of Hormuz, where they now, to date, they have snatched up 2 civilian merchant vessels, one that was flagged by our great partners, the United Kingdom, but also because of the level of sanctions that we're putting on them, they're doing some malign activities that are trying to disrupt regionally what's happening in the Middle East, but also trying to do some things that will have effects globally. And this was all born out of us pulling out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was the nuclear agreement that was designed to make sure Iran was not going to become a nuclear power. And then the North Koreans, anybody here served in Korea before? All right, anybody drink soju in Korea before? Anybody regret drinking soju in Korea before? All right. You know, sometimes partnering hurts, and the National Guard is the #1 component of building partnerships through our state partnership program. And if you're spending time in places like Korea, sometimes partnering hurts because not only do you have to go out and train your Korean allies, but you got to spend time with them after hours, and that can be pretty dangerous when it comes to what they like to drink and everything. But if you look at North Korea right now, I served for 27 months as the Command Senior Enlisted Leader of U.S. Forces Korea prior to becoming the SEAC. And I'm seeing some things out of North Korea now that I never thought I would see, which is Kim Jong-un traveling outside of his country. Kim Jong-un meeting with our President of the United States twice. Kim Jong-un dancing to South Korean K-pop music. Now, he doesn't do it very well, but I mean, I never thought I would see him doing things like that. So there's been a little change in what Kim is doing, where he's trying to show the world that, you know, he can be a global player, and he isn't this totalitarian dictator that the world has made him out to be. But in the end, when we say all that, he is still testing missiles. He still has nuclear capability, and he still has 750,000 troops on the demilitarized zone. Where on the other side, there's 28,500 Americans and about 400,000 ROCs, and we're still on the same standoff that we've been ever since the armistice in 1953. And then last but not least, violent extremist organizations. This is a generational threat that we're going to have to continue to counter, and we're going to have to continue to fight, and we're going to have to continue to deploy places around the world to make sure that this virus and this radical ideology does not continue to grow. I can tell you, I've been to Syria 3 times now, which the ISIS specifically said this is their geographical caliphate, and I can tell you that we have kicked the crap out of them severely so that they do not have this geographical caliphate. That doesn't mean that that threat is gone. They still have the ability to project attacks somewhat locally, but let there be no doubt they want to continue to grow and inspire people to become part of their organization and continue to project attacks into Europe and, in the end, the United States. So this threat is not going to go away. And when troops asking me about this kind of non-state actor, this terrorist insurgent organization, I tell them this. I have a 10-year-old grandson right now, And if he grows up and joins the military at 18 years old like I did, and he stays in this enterprise for 37 years like I have, he will still be facing this kind of radical ideology and this threat. So until we find a way to defeat the virtual caliphate that inspires people to want to be part of these organizations and the ability to get after that radical ideology itself, we will still have this challenge as we move forward. So our national defense strategy lays out, that's the threats that we think we have to get after with our nation. So my immediate boss, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Marine General Joe Dunford, who will be in position 30 September, he'll switch out, and General Mark Milley will become the 20th chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He develops the national military strategy, and this is how we're going to get after the threats that were defined in the NDS. And the key things that we look at now is force employment, force development, and force design for our national military strategy. In terms of force development, absolutely we have to have a force that can fight and win against a near-peer kind of threat and against any of these non-state actors or asymmetric kind of threats. And that means that we have to have a requisite readiness level in our active guard and reserve forces that can meet the nation's call when we need them to make it. But also, we have to be able to respond to any kind of activities or attacks. We have to be able to deter a strategic attack, meaning any kind of nuclear attack, deter a conventional attack, continue to assure our allies and partners, compete below the level of conflict, and in the end, as I mentioned before, we got to be ready to fight and win. So force development is force employment is something that is big on what we're doing now. And in terms of trying to have an effect on somebody like China and Russia, China is a nation that they want to rule the world, and they want to do it without having to shoot a single round of ammunition to do it. So this One Belt, One Road initiative they have, and their ability to be able to go into a country, a porous country, pour money into that company or into that country, and when that country cannot repay the debt, all of a sudden they start doing things like building ports and start building military facilities that they can project power in places outside of the Indo-Pacific area of operation. Right now, we've got some troops in Camp Lemonnier, Djibouti. We have plenty of guardsmen that are there right now. And what you may not know is right outside of Camp Lemonnier, right down the road, is a Chinese port that has about 10,000 sailors on it right now. So the Chinese have the ability to project maritime forces into the Suez Canal, the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, the Gulf of Aden, and all the way around into the Strait of Hormuz. So our force employment is going to be important. That means requisite forces that can do things like dynamic force employment, or can be a global response force, or be an emergency response force, whatever we need. But also, we got to continue to look on how we develop our forces. And that means that how we do planning, how we do decision-making, how we do force management practices, we have to continue to change with the current operating environment to make sure we're at the cutting edge of where we need to be in terms of developing our force. And in terms of force design, that means we got to continue to innovate. We got to leverage technology, and we got to be able to look at doing things potentially different than we've been in the past. And I can tell you, we all are resistant to change. But we have to understand that as our potential adversaries continue to adapt how they do business and what they want to do to get after their goals in the world, that we have to change and adapt and be that force that can get after the things I talked about in force employment. So that's how we kind of build the strategy. And I can tell you, as I travel around the world, and have been for the past 43 months, everywhere I go, I see men and women of the United States military doing great things. And when we look at these adversaries and we talk about how do we stack up against them in terms of competitive warfighting advantages or comparative warfighting advantages, even though we've been victims victim might be a bad word, but I'm going to use it anyways, of unstable budgets and sequestration in the past and deferred modernization practices, and then how that kind of stuff affects our Compo 2 and 3 forces, the Guard and the Reserve, to be able to have the requisite readiness we need. Even with all of that, we still have competitive warfighting advantages in the ground, air, and maritime domains, the traditional domains. And we still have comparative advantages in the emerging domains like cyber, space, and nuclear. Anybody want to join the Space Force here? Ron Anderson, you're going to run it, right? Okay. Hey, here's what I hear about the Space Force. I was out visiting some troops one time, and I said, why do you want to join the Space Force? And he said, well, if you're in space, you're weightless, so you can't fail the body composition program if you're in space. I didn't think of it that way, all right? But, so we still have those comparative advantages, although some of them have atrophied because of our focus on violent extremist organizations over the last 18 years. But with the last 2 years' budgets and the budget we're about to get, $700 billion, $716 billion, and about to be $738 to $750 billion, we're able to continue to invest in these emerging domains so that we continue to have these advantages. But the greatest advantage we have over any adversary, and one that it will take light years for the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, the North Koreans, and certainly terrorists to catch up to us is in the human domain. No other nation in the world trains, educates, trusts, and empowers people like we do. And we do this through either standard or non-standard certification processes that allows us to execute mission command. That means leaders are able, through commander's orders, to apply disciplined initiative to the mission or problem set they have, use some agile and adaptive thinking and practices, and accomplish the mission without being micromanaged or supervised. And when it comes to the empowerment of an enlisted force, it isn't even close to what any other nation in the world does. And let me give you a couple examples as I travel around the world. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not here to bash officers, all right? Our system of officers, non-commissioned officers, and enlisted is a time-proven effort that gives us our greatest competitive advantage. And ever since we professionalized our non-commissioned officer corps, we have become the greatest force in terms of the human domain. So I'm in Raqqa, Syria, and I'm visiting some of our elite special operators. We were just having this conversation, the secretary up here being one himself, even though he doesn't have the Joe Dirt sideburns or mullet like some of those guys have, But we were having this discussion. So I get on the ground, and none of those guys tell you who they are. It's like, hey, I'm John Wayne Troxell, I'm the SEAC. Yeah, I'm Jeff. All right, Jeff. Or this is Mike. Or, this is whoever. And this guy was on the roof of the building. Now, at this point in time, this was the main effort for the United States military in the Defeat ISIS campaign. The lasting defeat of ISIS, this was the main effort that I was out visiting. And I'm on the rooftop of the building in this guy, and he's explaining to me how they're getting after ISIS, how they're empowering the Syrian Democratic Forces, how they're using other partner forces out there in terms of NATO countries that are assisting and everything. And every once in a while, he would drop an F-bomb. And I'm like, okay, this doesn't sound like a West Pointer here, or somebody that, comes up as an officer. So finally I said, look, dude, enough. Tell me what rank you are. He goes, well, I'm actually an E8P, and I'm about to get promoted to Sergeant Major. Now think of this. The number one effort in our strategy to defeat ISIS, and the person that is in charge on the ground leading the fight, is a master sergeant promotable. No other nation in the world would put that kind of investment into building that non-commissioned officer, but more importantly, have a certification process that builds trust, and once we have trust, we can empower people. And oh, by the way, who was his counterpart for the Syrian Democratic Forces? It was a Kurdish female brigadier general. Almost unheard of in the Middle Eastern part of the country that you would have a female leading troops, let alone this coalition of Kurds and Arabs. And as I thought to myself on the roof of this building, and I looked at some of the folks that were there with me, I said, you know, nobody in Washington, D.C. will believe this. Nobody, because there's a general lurking around here somewhere, you know. There was an officer on the ground, I have to be serious. He was the surgeon, though, and he was down in the casualty collection point, all right? But my point is this. This just didn't happen overnight. The commander of that organization had built trust in the non-commissioned officers and trusted that that person could lead the fight there. Now, let me give you my guard reference here. So there I was. What are you supposed to say after that? Don't say it here. This is a G-rated. No kidding, there I was. I was in the Ukraine. Where's the California Guard at? All right, okay. And so I go out there, and you got to understand what's going on in Ukraine. So when you talk about Russian disinformation and you talk about Russian malign activities, here they had moved in 2014 using contractors, these little green men. They had taken over Crimea. They had a lot of effort going in the Black Sea. And then they created this unrest in the eastern part of the country that led these Russian-led separatist rebels to start uprising against the Ukrainian military. And the Ukrainian military, a Russian kind of Soviet model of officers and other ranks, were struggling for leadership at the tactical level. So I go out here and I visit this training camp out there where these California Guard non-commissioned officers are out training Ukrainian non-commissioned officers on the aspects of leading tactical level units, fire team squads, platoons, things like that. And these NCOs would get trained, and they'd immediately go to the ATO, the Anti-Terrorism Operations Zone, to conduct operations against the Russians, the Russian-led rebels, I should say. And the level of performance at the tactical level for the Ukrainian forces improved drastically because of the state partnership program we had between the state of California and Ukraine. Now, because of the number of Russian forces out there and everything, the Ukrainians got a long ways to go to continue to defend their sovereignty. But here's another instance where we empowered non-commissioned officers to get into a country and assist them to continue to better their military as we move forward. And so as we continue to look at the world we live in and what we need to do to be prepared, it's evident that we got to continue to invest in our people. When you look at, I go back to the state partnership programs, and we have, out of 196 countries, we got troops in 177 countries right now, to the tune of about 300,000 troops, and a lot of those troops are through this state partnership program. But I'll go visit an active force that's getting ready to deploy in a place they've never been before. Country, Botswana. Where's the North Carolina Guard at? Where are you guys at? Truly an army of one over here, all right? No, where are you at, North Carolina? Raise up. Any Carolina Panther fans back there? All right, okay. That's all good. I'm a Carolina Panther fan, only because Iowa doesn't have a pro team. But anyways, this active unit, part of this enhanced forward presence package into Africa, was getting ready to go to Botswana, and I was visiting. And they were talking about, we're really going to have to get on the ground and figure this stuff out because, there hasn't been a presence in Botswana in a long time. And I thought, how long has the North Carolina Guard been partnering with the country of Botswana? Years. So my point to this unit was, how about calling up the state sergeant major in North Carolina and I'm talking to the unit sergeant major, and you two guys talk and allow them to educate you on what they have going on. We learned this as well when we did the so-called rebalance in the Pacific. And we're going to put an active guard force back into the Pacific. Well, the Washington and Oregon Guard had never left. And so the active units wanted to continue to focus effort, and time out. I was the U.S. Army First Corps Sergeant Major at the time. I said, we're going to go down to Oregon and see a guy named Brunk Conley, who may be running around out here somewhere. He's retired now. And we're also going to see the Washington Guard guys, and we're going to figure out what they have going on out here and how we can work together to have the desired effect that we're trying to get after. So my message to you is this. As we continue to move forward in this very complex operating environment, arguably the most complex that we've had in the history of the United States military, and when you look at the requisite force that we need and the requisite talent we need to be able to do all the things that I spoke about earlier, things like assure, respond, compete, deter, and in the end, fight and win, we got to continue to invest in our people, and it's got to be a total force continuum kind of package of active forces, guard, and reserve as we move forward to make sure we have the force we need, and also an investment with our allies and partners. So I'll end by telling you this. The operational tempo that we have had and is going to continue to be the same. It may even grow for some organizations. As we continue to try and maintain readiness that we need against a near-peer kind of competitor in a fight, people like Iran and North Korea, and then you look at things that are unforecasted like Venezuela, the southwest border, and things like that. As we continue to push forward, try to keep readiness, but also continue to be able to get after the things that our nation needs us to get after, it's evident to me that even though we may not have all the resources, we may not have all the people, if we invest in the people that we do have, we will be best prepared for those challenges as we move forward. So I'm going to end there, and Sergeant Major, if anybody has any questions, I'm willing to take it. So thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions, comments?
Sergeant Major, first, thank you for being here. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. We have some great people like yourself, Sergeant Major Preston, Sergeant of the Army Preston, Ron Anderson, John Sampa. Some of the leaders of our military are here, but we're surrounded by a lot of the next generation that are here. What would you say they need to look at to be able to be prepared to come take John, Ron, or your place in leadership cycles?
All right, thanks. So forgot Sergeant Major of the Army, Ken Preston. I didn't see you sitting back there. You're more camouflaged now in your, Joseph A. Banks suit now. But good to see you, Sergeant Major. I will tell you this. There is no substitute for having the greatest competitive advantage for an individual soldier, airman, or whatever than being in the band of excellence, both personally, professionally, physically, mentally, emotionally, technically, and tactically. And in order for us to continue to be the best at what we do, 60% as a standard is not what we should be shooting for. We should be shooting for that 90% in every task that we have. And every day, to you folks back there, you got to think, are you prepared for the worst day of your life? Are you prepared if we have to face a high-end threat like North Korea, where there's 750,000 North Korean troops on the demilitarized zone, and all of a sudden, artillery rounds start landing in Seoul, 250,000 American expats are at risk, 10 million Koreans are at risk, and all of a sudden we have to employ forces on the Korean Peninsula. Are you prepared right now, physically, mentally, emotionally, technically, and tactically, for the worst day of your life? And if the question is, I don't know, then you got to get after being ready for the worst day of your life. And I don't care what you do in the military, there is no substitute to being at peak optimal performance levels in terms of human performance. That means being physically ready for the demands of not just combat, but 18 to 20-hour days that you could be doing, regardless of what you're at. Mentally and emotionally, for the cost that comes with high-end conflict like that. And in the end, having the proficiency level, technically and tactically, to be able to perform your duties, and then as a part of a team to the best of your ability, so that it is at that 90% level that allows us to continue to have that competitive advantage. So I'd say this to you back there. Every day, when you're wearing this uniform, you got to continue to prepare yourself. And there is no substitute every day than taking care of yourself physically, either through fitness or looking out for your health or how you eat, how you fuel yourselves, and things like that. I've been doing this for 37 years. And I got five months left, well, 4.5 months, and then I'm retiring after 38 years. But every day I wake up, how do I smoke myself today so that I can lead by example? And everybody should be looking at their leaders, and if their leaders are doing something, then they ought to try and emulate that. As a matter of fact, I had a relaxing 7-mile run along the river today, you know. It's a little different running along this river than it is the Mississippi River in Davenport, you know, especially now where I may need to have a life jacket when I'm down there. But the point being, to you troops back here, every day you got to validate your credentials to be prepared for the worst day of your life. And that could be in combat, that could be during a deployment, it could be every day, and all of a sudden you get a no-pay due. How do you take care of your family? How do you take care of paying the bills and everything? But it starts off by being able to get after this adversity that you may face in your life, and certainly that you may face during a deployment or combat. So my message to you is strive for excellence in everything you do. Shoot for 90%, and if you get 75, no problem. That's 15% better than 60. If 60 is a passing standard and we shoot for 60 in everything we do, 59, a failure is only 1 point away. So be the best that you can be every day and prepare for the worst day of your life. Okay. Oh no, Ron Anderson is at the podium.
SEAC, first and foremost, your consistent leadership by example is appreciated, brother. Thanks for what you do every single day for all of us who wear stripes. Personally and professionally, thank you. I recently had the opportunity to go downrange with my boss down to Afghanistan and saw some of the great work our National Guard's doing in the space mission in particular, and what they're affecting at a tactical level. I think a lot of us understand what that means at tactical execution level, but as you know better than anybody, we've evolved now to a formally named COCOM in space.
That's right.
Can you just walk us through a little bit about what it looks like today as a COCOM and where you think you and your boss are going to look to the future?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. So, you heard it best, okay? And the president stood up and said, we're going to create a space force. And so my staff, the staff I belong to, the Joint Staff and the Office of the Secretary of Defense, we went back and did the analysis and everything and said, all right, to create another service out of existing personnel, existing resources and everything was going to be tough for us to do right off the bat. So we came up with a plan that we'll create a U.S. Space Command, a combatant command that would focus on space as a warfighting domain, but also a space development agency that will allow us to look at technology and concepts that will allow us to compete in space, specifically with people like the Chinese and the Russians. And even we're looking now at some special operations stuff in space. Now that might be with some cyber professionals or things like that. But I think as you continue to look forward here, and it's open source information, the Chinese have put 300 anti-satellite devices in space. Now don't get me wrong, to all you war fighters out there that are kind of dog-faced like me, you know, when I got into this job, I was a guy that was accustomed to pulling security on the roof, you know, of a building. All of a sudden they started talking about space as a warfighting domain and everything, and I thought, wow, this stuff is all new to me. But what I didn't realize, it's the most contentious domain that we have in the world right now. You know, the Chinese, you know, about a decade ago said, hey, we're going to shoot down one of our satellites to see if we can do it, and they did it. And now with all these anti-satellite devices they have up there, and they're wanting to continue to do things that may retask the satellites that we have or potentially defeat them, and in terms of what that would do for our GPS and stuff for ballistic missile defense and things like that. it's clear to me that we have to have this effort that continues to allow us to have an advantage up there. So I think in the end, we're going to continue to build on SpaceCom right now. General Raymond has already been confirmed as a commander. Chief Master Sergeant Roger Toberman is the command chief. Toby was just at my Defense Senior Enlisted Leader Conference, getting him integrated with all the other COCOMs in the service Senior Enlisted. And there'll be IOC here, I think, around October with about 300 folks, and they'll continue to build to full operational capability here shortly after that. And then as we continue to move forward in the future, especially with expanded budgets, you're going to see the Space Force come to fruition as we move forward. And I think it's a great idea because when you look at what the Chinese and the Russians are doing in space, if we don't continue to get after this, we're going to be at a severe disadvantage. So thanks for the question. Anybody else? Okay. Well, again, to the leadership up here, thank you so much for allowing me to be here. To all of you out there, I'll leave you with three things. The three no's that I know right now, having served in this job for 43 months and advising the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Secretary of Defense. I talked a lot about the challenges in the world we live in. I talked a lot about some of the challenges with unstable budgets and things, but the three things I know right now is that the United States military, our active guard and reserve forces, even with all of that, we can still defend our homeland and our way of life. Whether it's here or our interest abroad, we can still do that. We still can assure our allies and meet our alliance and partnership commitments. And last but not least, and it's the thing I talk to the most, we still have competitive and comparative warfighting advantages in every domain, but the best one we have is in the human domain. And we will continue to build on that by attracting, recruiting, and retaining the best talent in all compos of our force to make sure that we have that requisite force that can meet the demands that our country and our citizens need to defend our freedom and way of life. So thank you all. God bless you all, and I'll see you all out and about. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sergeant Major Troxell, for those great words and all the information. Really, it's been an honor having you here. I just want to make sure I asked you to come back up here so I could give you a coin.
Oh, thank you so
much. And I
much.
appreciate so much that you were here with
Yes, ma'am.
our EANGUS members.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. Thank you.
And I understand you're going to stick around this evening so everybody will be able to meet with you a little bit?
Yeah.
Come to some of our events?
Absolutely. I'll be here. I'm going back to D.C. Wednesday morning, so I look forward to interacting with everybody.
Great. All right.
And we can do some PT tomorrow, too. So,
Okay, there you go. Sorry, I won't be there, but.
Oh, no.
I think there's some younger guys that.
Well,
can
in
join
5
you.
months, those
Guys,
folks
yeah.
in the back got the con because I'm going to go off on retirement and have a grandchild in one hand and a Miller Lite in the other. So,
All right.
thank you very much.
Sergeant at Arms, please escort our distinguished guests from the podium. Thank you, dear. All right. Okay, I now call on past President, Chief Master Sergeant Retired John Harris for the nominations report.
All right, so as a reminder, the only way to nominate for a position is online on the website. That way everything's contained in one spot. So based on what we've received through the online form, Area 1, we have a nomination for Director Air, John Green from Rhode Island. Area 1 Army, Thomas Slowinski from New Jersey. Area 2 Air, Robert Barnett from Virginia. Area 2 Army, Veldesai from Delaware. Area 3 Air, James Brown from Tennessee. Area 3 Air, Matthew Payne from Alabama. Area 3 Air, Larry Adams from Alabama. Area 3 Army, Don Mapes from Tennessee. Area 3 Army, Stephen Boatwright from Alabama. Area 4 Air, Robert White, Mississippi. Area 4 Air, Michael Wolf from Texas. Area 4 Air, Ashley Broadnax from Arkansas. And there is no Area 4 Army nomination that I am aware of. White is Army. Robert White is Army. Okay. I'll correct that. Moving on to Area 5, Director Air, Charles Kaysen, North Dakota. Area 5 Army, Joshua Wormers from South Dakota. Area 6 Air, Robert Bourne, Wyoming. Area 6 Air, Stephen Hagan, Montana. Area 6 Army, Jerome Richard, Montana. Area 6 Army, Bernardo Acosta, Arizona. And Area 6 Army, Scott Evans, Utah. Area 7, I do not have a nomination for the Director Air position. All right, if that's incorrect, I'll update it on the next report. Area 7 Army, Daniel Elkins, California, and Area 7 Army, Marcia Adams, California. All right, so other than the Area 7 Air, any alibis? Okay, that concludes the report.
Okay, this is an interim committee report and requires no further action. At this time, I'll call on the Credentials and Rules Committee Chair for updated report. Chair Raleigh? Okay, he's on the way.
All right. So the Committee on Credentials and Rules met on August 5th, 2019 from 09 to 10:20 at the Iowa Event Center. Delegate badges were issued as follows. Authorized delegates, 251. Issued badges, 196. Proxies granted, 47. For a total of delegate votes of 243. The following states and territories do not have credentials issued: Guam, Kentucky, Puerto Rico, and Virgin Islands. The Committee on Credentials and Rules will meet again on August 6th from 09 to 09:30, located at the Iowa Event Center, right at the Credentials and Rules booth. Madam President, this is an ongoing report that will be filed.
Thank you. This too is an interim committee report and requires no further action. All right, thank you. Okay, at this time, we're going to deviate a little bit, and I think we've got some raffles. So I'm going to try and pull some raffles. Sergeant Arms, are you going to help with this? Got some items back there?
Yes, Madam President.
Okay, and so there are a number of things, and so everybody got one of these cards that says, get more information. So if you filled those out and took those to the EANGUS booth, that's what we've got some prizes now. Past President Harris, do you have a list of prizes, or do we have some stuff back there? Why don't you tell us what you have, and then we'll pull for those.
We have two Stinger hot sunglasses from Revision, and then the 2 Hideout XP DS units from Feel Good Incorporated.
Okay. Are those companies in here to pull or not? All right. If not, okay. So why don't you pull a name for one of the glasses? All right, this is must be present to win.
Elizabeth Cummings.
Elizabeth Cummings. Is there Elizabeth Cummings? No? All right.
Not here.
Put her name back in. We'll draw another one.
Courtney Terrell.
All right.
This is going well.
There's a lot of people in the room. Somebody's going to win. Come on.
Willie Grigo.
Willie Grigo from New Mexico. He's here, right? All right. All right, we got one winner. All right. I'm going to pull another one.
Danny Cameron.
Danny Cameron. Right there? All right. Another winner. All right. Those were the 2 glasses then?
Yes.
Okay. And so the other is a system?
The 10s unit, formerly.
10s unit, okay.
I don't know.
Pull for one of those.
Ashley Outland.
Ashley? Oh, all right. One of the professional development. That's good.
One more.
Are we pulling another one?
Shelley Reeder.
Shelley Reeder?
Right down there.
Shelley Reeder, South Dakota. All right.
That's it, Madam President.
All right. So I got a couple. We'll just go ahead and then we'll move on and we'll get out a little bit early for lunch. So I have one. This is a Google Home unit. So do you want to pull for this?
Tom Slowinski.
Tom Zielinski. All right, you can come up when at lunch break and pick this up. And then the last one we'll do, I also have a $50 Amazon gift card. So we'll make that the last one for right now. We got more raffles to come tomorrow.
Kim White.
What was Kim White?
Yes.
Kim White. Oh, all right.
Nope.
Let's do another one.
Ricky Myers.
Ricky Myers, Mississippi.
Congratulations.
All right. We'll get that to you. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to call on the secretary for any administrative announcements, and I think we need to complete the roll call. We'll check once again for any states that may have showed up between yesterday and today.
So I wanted to remind everyone to use this back exit for entry and exit into the delegate floor. We see people coming in and out of these doors. We asked yesterday, so just be conscious of that. We had a pair of prescription sunglasses in a brown case that was lost on the floor yesterday, so if anyone's found that, if you could either bring it to me or take it to the operations center. We were made aware this morning that there are states on the floor today that weren't present for yesterday's roll call. So what I'll do is go down the list of states who were not present yesterday. If you're represented on the floor today, if you'll come forward. I'm assuming Guam is not here. Idaho? Uh-oh. Nope. May have to use the one in the back. There it is.
Oh, there it is now. Perfect.
Afternoon, Idaho. Idaho came with one delegate, and so I'm it. I'm Eric Danielson, and we're just here. Go Boise State.
All right, thank you. I'll mark you present. Illinois.
Mr. Secretary, Illinois is in the House finally. We have 3 representatives as delegates or alternates. We also have 7 PDs and our command sergeant major for the state.
Thank you. Kentucky. Massachusetts.
Mr. Secretary, Massachusetts comes with 6 attendees, 3 delegates, and our State Command Sergeant Major Greg Woodberg. Massachusetts is in the House.
Thank you. Michigan.
Mr. Secretary, my name is First Sergeant Sproviero. I'm the newly elected state president. Greetings from Michigan, the land of unsubmitted delegate reports, where our motto is send the new guy and don't tell him anything. Some facts about Michigan. Home of Camp Grayling, Maneuver Training Center, founded in 1913. Camp Grayling is the largest National Guard training facility in the United States at approximately 147,000 acres, which we do our best to try to burn down every year. It is also the home of Northern Strike, conducted at Camp Grayling and Alpena Combat Readiness Training Center. Northern Strike 19 was just wrapped up last week and is again expected to be the Department of Defense's largest joint reserve component exercise of the year, employing about 6,000 to 7,000 personnel. 2019 marked another first for Northern Strike with the launch, employment, and recovery of an MQ-9 Reaper from Alpena CRTC. Michigan comes with 1 delegate, 8 attendees, including our State Command Sergeant Major, 2 professional developments, and 2 exhibitors from Central Michigan University. Michigan is in the House.
Thank you.
And by the way, I'm actually a Bobcat.
Oklahoma. Oregon.
Mr. Secretary, greetings from Oregon, home to the world's largest mushroom, 2,385 acres. Not surprising, this is also where most Sasquatch sightings occur. But this is not the reason the Oregon delegation was a little late getting here. Our state is also home to 208 breweries, 725 wineries, which might be why we're a little late getting here. Mr. Secretary, the delegation from the end of the Oregon Trail is present with 3 delegates and 6 for professional development. Thank you.
Thank you. Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. Madam President, that concludes the follow-up roll call.
Thank you, and now call on the conference chair, Command Sergeant Major Kennebeck, for any further host state announcements.
We just made a schedule announcement for the senior enlisted panel this afternoon. Will now be in this room. So if you're going to attend the senior enlisted panel, that will now be in this room. The blood drive is going on in 401 if you're interested in providing some blood. Today is the only day that that will happen. If you have items for the junior enlisted raffle for this evening, please take them up to the operations cell and we'll make sure they get over to the Iowa Tap Room where we will have our event this evening. The Iowa Tap Room has about 100 taps on their bar and 100 different varieties of beer to choose from while you're there. They will not be ordering off the menu this evening. We're just gonna have all the food provided out in a couple of the rooms there. We bought the bar out tonight, so it is just us there to have a good time, and we hope you enjoy it.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move into breaking for the day. The TRICARE breakout, I just want to remind everyone, which is hosted by the CEOs, HealthNet and United Healthcare, is coming up this afternoon at 1300 hours in rooms 316 and 317. So that should be a good breakout to attend if you're concerned about health care or have some questions there. I also encourage you to participate in all the committee meetings that are going on this afternoon. There's some training, so check your schedule and get out and get some of that information that we're providing. We will now, one other thing, just a reminder, the State President's Luncheon starts at noon right after we leave here, and that's in room 310. So we now stand in recess until tomorrow, Monday, August 6th at 0900 hours.